said, honestly, Phil, the pre-solver Phil would be a favorite in this match. If you can't figure out what the solver would do, stop thinking about it and do what Phil would do.
The interview by PokerOrg.
Welcome to the interview with Phil Galfond today as our guest with PokerOrg. And Phil has won 3 WSOP bracelets. At one time, I'm not sure if you're still playing under the name, he was Oh My God Clay Aiken. And recently, was it Ryan LaPlante or someone said, I met Clay Aiken and asked him if he knew about you,
It was
right?
Brian Hastings.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was Brian. It was Brian, our friend Brian Hastings, who's 6-time bracelet winner. And Phil is one of the most successful online players in online history. And you write an amazing blog. I was going through it. I can't read all poker content anymore, but I'm going through and going, wow, this is like amazing information. Every title made me interested to look, like blockers and variants and all these things. So we'll talk about your blog and your love for writing, because you're a very good writer. For those people, I'm sure everybody in the industry knows Phil. Let's talk a little bit about how you began in poker, your love for the game, how you started, just for a second or two.
Yeah. Cool. I like to gamble. I played games with friends. I mean, they were kind of poker games growing up, but nothing I've seen since, like since I started playing for real, spread in a casino or online. And didn't take it too seriously. Don't think I was particularly good or bad. And my freshman year of college, one of my friends that I used to play with all throughout high school, he won a tournament on Party Poker for $35,000 and became the talk of our group of friends. And I mean, it piqued my interest a little bit, but it wasn't until he reached out to me directly and he said, Phil, I've been studying poker. I picked up some books and actually learned how to play well. I think you'd be really good at this. And that was enough for me to go for it.
And it was all online at the time, right? You weren't playing live or no. Where did you go to college? Did you attend
What's
college?
college? University of Wisconsin, Madison.
Okay.
So I was 19 when I started playing, and so I couldn't play. I mean, you could get a fake ID, but I was playing online
Right.
because you could play online. So yeah, I picked up a couple books, and the first good one that I read, I won't mention the bad ones, was Hold'em Poker for Advanced Players by Sklansky. And I found the 2+2 forums through that. I started playing $10 sit and goes with a 10 buy-in bankroll. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, the rest is history.
Oh, come on. You just skimmed over a whole career and starting an amazing business. But I know some of your mentors along the way have also influenced my life and my thinking, not just poker, but Tommy Angelo. Can you talk a bit about how you guys ran into each other and the elements of poker and his effect on your life and your career?
Yeah. So Tommy, as you know, a wonderful guy. He so after my first year, roughly, I think it was a year and a half, I had played sit and goes exclusively. I was sit and go pro. I had
Mhm.
moved up from $10 sit and goes to, I mean, I was playing as high as $1,000 sit and goes, mostly like 100s and 200s, but occasionally there were these bigger tournaments. And I wanted to switch to cash games because some of my friends had moved over from sit and goes to cash games. They said it was better. And I'd always been a fan of investing in myself. Um, I remember during my sit and go days, I begged um, Daryl Dickin, Gigabet,
Oh,
who was like the
yeah.
most prolific sit and go player. I begged him to coach me, and I hassled him, and eventually he coached me for just like 2 sessions or something, and he was very like abstract
Yes.
stuff. But anyway, so when I switched to cash games, I was like, okay, I need a cash game coach, and on the 2+2 forums, I think they had a sub forum for coaches, and I just saw the name Tommy Angelo come up many times where people said he's a fantastic coach. And I was like, all right, well, I need a cash game coach. And it seems like Tommy's the guy. So I reached out to him. And it was a 3-day weekend, I think, in Vegas. I met him at the Mirage. And I just remember the first day, I didn't really know what to expect. I had talked to him on the phone briefly,
Hmm.
but I've been used to my coaches so far. I'd had a couple were online guys like me, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And he was an older guy, and I was like, "Does this guy play online at all? Does he? I don't know. And anyway, he sat me down and he had this stack of papers. In my memory, it's like massive. It probably wasn't. It was probably like 80 pages or something, um, which was going to be what we were going to cover
Mhm.
for the next few days. And I, yeah, I just remember being super excited to dive in and learn about cash game strategy because I had no idea what it was. And out of those 80 pages, basically zero about cash game strategy. Um, and so I always say Tommy didn't teach me any of the things that I wanted to learn, but he taught me everything that I needed to learn, which was how to be a poker player, really.
Right. He wasn't teaching you how to play ace king out of position or anything like that. Not at all from my remembrances of Tommy. Do you guys still interact? Do you have some as
Yeah.
friends or come across each other?
Yeah. I mean, we email frequently. The last time when he comes to Vegas, we meet up. So I think the last time was within the last year. I had dinner with him, but, not regularly, but we've kept in touch. That was 18 years ago,
Wow.
that he coached me, and we had a couple follow-up calls, but he didn't really coach me since then, but we kept in touch as friends.
Well, as far as your evolution of that part of the game, that and his advice obviously extends to how you live your life.
Yeah.
Your philosophy is a positive mindset. I know I'm pretty sure he's big into meditation and things like that, which is a big background of mine, and stillness and the way he approaches things and not being reactive. I was looking at some of your blogs, and one was poker isn't about trying to get lucky. I think a lot of guys think, oh, I need to get lucky here, lucky there. I found some great advice when you have like my best advice I've ever gotten in poker. I was checking that out, but can you talk about? We'll talk about a few of them. Like when he told you that it's not about getting lucky, did it like turn a knob in your head and go, oh, it's really about playing a certain way or about approaching the game in a different way?
That that particular one, no, just because my first learning experience was Sklansky, and Sklansky was
Mm.
very theoretical. He
Yep.
was very much, like I for a while played like tried to be too much of a robot, I think, because of Sklansky's tutelage through books,
Hmm.
which was just like, doesn't matter what happens in the hand. This is your EV. Like, yeah. Um, and so I pretended to not be affected by things because I thought that's what you were supposed to be, which kind of you are in a way. So no, like that one, even though Tommy speaks about it too, I think that I resonated more with Tommy's approach, which was, recognizing that we're human and we have emotions, and, really taking a stoic kind of mindset, and kind of zooming out or reframing what you're looking at, and realize that, this is kind of expected. This is one of the things that's supposed to happen is we we run good, we run bad, and all we can do is play our best.
Right. Well, who gave you the advice? You will run worse than you ever thought possible at one time. Was that along the same? Was it Tommy also?
No, that was in the two plus
Well,
two
well,
forums.
right. That was Craig. I was saying that was
Craig.
me. So,
Yeah.
so
Uh,
tell me about that. So you came across that, and because I'm sure most players say, "Wow, I'm good now. It's not going to happen to me." Something like that. The approach to the game.
yeah. Well, it was funny because I read that, and it was just impactful because it was a powerful statement to not just say, hey, variance is bad and like it can get pretty bad. He said, you will eventually run worse than you ever thought possible. And he was somebody I looked up to. He was another, I mean, like him and Gigabet were big on the 2+2 forums in the sit and go world. And it really, I just remembered that always. And it
Yeah.
didn't happen to me for a long time, till many years later, that I had my first very bad run. I couldn't even tell you when it was, this one, the first in particular, but I do remember feeling like, oh yeah, this is what what he said was going to happen. I didn't think this was possible to lose for this long with this much edge.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, I think I owe my career a little bit to Gigabet as far as getting in the business. You probably don't know this. I've got a truck passing me, but I was just keeping up with the forums, Pocket Fives, right, all that, and seeing what Gigabet was talking about. And he was this tall, slender dude that played and was a phenom in tournaments. And if you remember, he said, I will bet anybody anything that I will win a tournament leaderboard any month we pick. It was a big challenge. And people came out of the woodwork. I think millions of dollars were laid down on this series of 1 month. Marcel Lusk had a team against him. All these players were playing around the world to try to beat Gigabet. I'm not sure if it was party poker or whatever the leaderboard. You could pick any leaderboard. And it lasted a month. A guy named JJ Prodigy won, a teenager who said he went to USC, but he was like 16 here in
Yeah.
LA. But that I got a chance to talk to him a few times, and he talked about posture at the table. He obviously understood how the spine works and energy moves. He said, I sit really upright. So that was interesting. They introduced me to that. But from that, I pitched an idea to some guy I ran into, I think Justin Marchand, a card player, and said, hey, do you mind if I write this article about this event? He said, go ahead. If we like it, we'll buy it. If not, it's fine. So I wrote that. And then he said, what else do you want to do? And that began my
Oh, wow.
journey of writing for Card Player. And we've done a couple of things for Card Player. I owe
Yeah.
a lot to those guys. But in the same breath, I was looking at the best advice and your relationship with Tom Dwan. How did that come
Mhm.
about? Because you talked about, he said, I wouldn't have called there. I would have bluffed. You talk about a situation. You said, no, I would have raised there. And that opened your mind again to a new way to play. Can you talk a bit about meeting Tom and the evolution of your relationship with him and what you learned from him?
Yeah. So when I met Tom, he was already a legend online. You know, I was playing 510 no limit. He was playing 50, 100, 100, 200. What I don't remember what the biggest games were that ran back then. This was on, I think this was UB.
Yeah.
But he was playing the biggest games. And he was just friends of some of my friends. So the first summer I stayed in a house with several poker players from the 2+2 forums, and Tom, and Dave Benefield were friends with each other, and really Dave was kind of part of our. He didn't live with us, but he was part of that sit and go crew,
Mm.
and so Dave would come over, and Tom would come with him, and that's how I met Tom. And he he was very he's always very generous with sharing knowledge. And I remember this is not this was a year or two later from what I'm talking about now, but I remember I was most struck by there was a point now where I was playing Nosebleed, No Limit Hold'em. He was telling me how the PLO games are really good and I should get in them, and I'm just like like he was telling me that night. He's like, no, these games are really good, get in them. And I was saying, Tom, I've never played PLO. I
No
don't know what
clue.
you're doing. And he's saying, okay, well, just watch me play. And so he let me sit behind him and watch him play, you know, 6 tables of 200, 400 PLO. And yeah, he's just always very giving in that way with no expectation of, you returning the favor. Um, but yeah, it was just a simple hand that, we talked about hands a lot when we
Yeah.
hung out over the summer. It's what we loved to do. We were all poker nerds and it was fun. And I had played a hand and asked him about it. And it was basically I had a bluff catcher on the river facing a triple barrel. And I said I wanted to call because XYZ. And he pretty quickly said, oh, I'd raise. And I never considered raising. I was like, is this a call or is it a fold? And he was like, well, I mean, you've called twice. You obviously have a made hand on this board. And he'll realize that and just fold whatever, overpair he has.
Right.
And so that opened my mind to, well, evaluating every option at all points.
Right. Was this so? Tell me about the evolution of your game at that point. Were you driven to? Obviously, you're one of the more successful online players in the game. At the same time, you've won 3 bracelets. So where was your head? Did you really? Were you driven at the time to really make your mark in tournaments and do it there? And you evolved into playing PLO and learning that game, and also reach the highest stakes at the time. Before we'll talk about your evolution into business side of things. So when you how was like helping other players evolve to that next level of high stakes? What's the best advice you have for them, and how did you happen to do it? I mean, obviously that was 10 or 15 years ago, so things have changed, and I'm talking about the evolution of the game from G bucks. We'll talk about that to solvers. So can you share a little bit about the evolution of your learning curve of the game?
Yeah, so I'll say more than this, but the short answer, which is what we were just talking about and what I did, and one of the biggest keys to my success, and what I would advise everybody to do, is surround yourself with other poker players that are learning with you. Or if for some reason you can't, I mean, you could always do that, but if for some reason you can't, at least get a coach. You can always hire somebody. You can always pay somebody to be that person for you. But um, other people, I think, are just can't be overstated how helpful it is to be learning with others
Mm.
rather than out there on an island. Even, learning from training videos is valuable, learning from solvers is valuable, but if it's just you and the video or you and the solver and no feedback loop and no kind of shared motivation and the like there's an emotional reward in helping others
For
get
sure.
better that turns into motivation for you to get better. There's camaraderie. There's so much that goes into it. It's not just one thing, but that has always been like the biggest jumps in my career have been when I've been working closely with other players. My own journey, once I switched to cash games after getting Tommy coaching, um, I was playing 510, and really for me, I don't advise this, but I was a big shot taker because
Mm-hmm.
I was very much like I cared about the money, but I didn't use money at that point. I was a college kid. I never spent any of the money I made. It was a tool to play higher stakes. And for me, what motivated me to shot take and play nosebleeds was the same thing that motivated me to play tournaments and try to win a bracelet. It was some pride and
Mm-hmm.
wanting A, to prove to myself that I can do it, and then B, and this is specifically with tournaments, some recognition. Where in the early years, I remember it was very common in the early years of online poker that high stakes online players and high stakes live players had a kind of a mutual disrespect for each other.
Yeah.
And I would watch these poker celebrities play on TV and think, "Oh my God, they're so terrible." Yet the whole world thinks that they're these poker heroes.
Right.
And so I had a chip on my shoulder. I was like, "This is unfair. I'm so good. I need to prove that I'm so good." And so that started my quest for trying to win a tournament. I was never an MTT player by like that was never my main focus or study at any point. But tournaments were a way to get on a big stage and win on a big stage. And as soon as I turned 21, it was January, and I went out and played. Like a week later, went and played two 10K buy-in events, which I had a 100K bankroll, so that was not really well
Advice.
advisable. But I
Yeah.
played a WSOP circuit event and a WPT event in Tunica, Mississippi, as soon as I could because I just wanted to win an event on a big stage. And I remember my thought process then. I was just like, okay, here's what I can do. I can grind throughout the week, and then or like every week I can grind and make this much per month, and then I can go buy into a 10K tournament that month and then go back to grinding because I just wanted those opportunities. I
Right.
changed plans after that for one reason or another. I think because I switched to cash games, that was sit and goes. But yeah, it was a chip on my shoulder thing. It was feeling like I had so much skill, not specifically me, so do my peers, but feeling like it was unfair in some way that wasn't seen by the world.
Was that part of your evolution? That's not quite the right word, but foray into writing. I mean, obviously, you maybe just love writing. You did it well in college, or maybe you liked it as a kid. I'm a voracious reader and worked hard at writing. But I opened Bluff magazine. I was writing for the other magazine at the time. Opened Bluff and go, oh, Phil Galfond's writing for this. What's this? What's going on? So I just try to get every issue that you wrote in because you're a very articulate writer. Even when you're writing and doing funny things on Twitter or X or whatever, you've made some amazing posts, and we'll talk about that. But can you talk a bit about? Do you love to write? I mean, obviously your blogs are very articulate and detailed with your sense of humor. And maybe the evolution of G Bucks after studying Scholastic, and that was one of the first articles I read. So I want to read everything this guy writes. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I do love to write. I think I think I love to teach more than I love to write. and writing is a great way to teach. I do. I mean, I'm giving you the example right now. Sometimes I'm slow to process. I want to find the perfect thing to say. And so in writing, you can do that. You can take as long as you need to put things the exact way that you want them. And so I really love teaching through writing. It's a slower process than teaching through video.
Yeah.
But yes, I enjoy it. And I do think it comes more from loving to teach than loving to write itself. But I do love both.
Well, when you read Sklansky's approach to equity in hands, how did you come across and say, well, this is not quite right? Or how did you develop G bucks? Explain what Galfond bucks are or Galfond dollars.
Yeah. So going back, I'm
Going
pretty
back
sure
in time.
I'm pretty sure I remember. So Sklansky Bucks was basically, it was kind of all in EV,
Yeah.
or it was basically all in EV. So if you got all in with kings against queens and you lost, well, you lost $100, but you actually won $30 in Sklansky Bucks. So that's all it was. And I don't think he was. It's not conflicting with G Bucks. He wasn't wrong.
No, I didn't
Uh,
get that. Yeah.
it was just I realized that, as we play, I mean, this is going to sound very elementary to everybody who's, started in the last few years, but we're playing against an entire range of hands that our opponent can have. And so not only should we look at how our hand did compared to how it was expected to do against their actual hand, we should look at how it did compared to how it was expected to do against their whole range, which we can never fully know,
Yeah.
but we can give a good guess to. And so G Bucks was essentially the introduction. I was not the only person who knew about this, but I think I was the first person to write about it in this way. It was an introduction to range analysis and playing against a full range of hands rather than I put them on ace king.
Right. Exactly. I first came across, was this a new concept? Because I even read this in your wiki, like he was one of the first players to talk about playing against ranges. I had read a book early on with Tree Wynn. Do you remember that? Let There Be
Yeah.
Range.
Yeah.
And Tree, very smart cash game player, and I really enjoyed working with him. And that was one of my first introductions to ranges. And that was
Yeah.
happening, well, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, right? 15 years ago
Yep.
or so.
Right. Yeah.
Then what do you think about how strategy has evolved with the use of solvers? And we'll talk a bit about your training site, Run It Once. You got some amazing coaches there, including our friend Brian Hastings. But how has the game changed for you with the addition of solver that available to people to use?
I mean, solvers have changed the game significantly.
I know.
And truth be told, I was pretty unhappy about solvers coming out.
When you first saw them, yeah.
Yeah, because I was very much a figure outer rather than a studier. And I would I mean, yeah, I would have theories of my own that came out of my own head.
Yeah.
And when there's no source to tell you what's right, that's the best you can do, kind of, is have your own theories and yeah, work with other people and then, you could run numbers and things like that. But as solvers were coming out, I was pretty scared about my place in poker because I assumed that, the future of high stakes poker would be the best studiers or the best players, and the figure outers get left behind if they're not going to keep up with the studiers and the memorizers. I don't have a great memory. I was never great at that aspect of school. I was like I wouldn't like there. I would often have. I was a bad student, but I would take a test and I would figure out the right answer to a problem in a way that I made up, and I would not get a good grade because I didn't remember the formula that I was supposed to use.
Right.
And so, yeah, memory was never a strength of mine. And studying, like, I think people have the perception. I think probably just because of the way I speak and I don't know, I'm nerdy enough that I study a lot and I'm a very studious player. And I mean, compared to the average poker player, yes, but compared to my peers playing high stakes, not at all. And so I was pretty scared about solvers, and I had moved to exclusively PLO when the No Limit solvers came out, so I didn't use them. And then it was about, I don't remember when Monker Solver came out for PLO, but it was during the time that I was accidentally semi-retired because I was working on so many businesses that I didn't have time to play. And so I had stepped away from the game a little bit and solvers were there. And I kind of thought that might be the end for me as a
Mhm.
player. I mean, not the literal end, but the end of me competing at a high level because I just didn't think that I had what it took to study from and apply. You know, look at all of these simulations and all of these different range strategies on different boards and against different sizings and process it and remember it and execute it. And then it was, I mean, we're skipping ahead now, but it was end of 2019 when I decided to do the Galfond challenges and play high
Yeah,
stakes
I was going to ask you
poker
that.
again.
Yeah.
And at first it seemed like I might have been right that that I wasn't cut out for the post solver era poker, but eventually something clicked and I was very pleased to find out that I think the same skills that made you a great poker player 18 years ago, they still matter a lot today. You just have new tools to learn with, and you do have to put in some work to keep up.
Yeah, well, you see some players. I mean, the Chad Corneth and Alex Foxons, who obviously are knowledgeable of the GTO and the iCaxtons at the same time, very exploitive players in the same way too. Watching Chance play, one of my favorite players, and Alex, Sean Deeb doesn't even have solvers in his
Yeah.
computer, he says. And then you've got somebody that comes along, a young hotshot who's leading the Player of the Year right now, Jesse Lonis, a whole different animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And players love playing with him and love watching him play. So obviously, you don't have to be a solver guy to reach those levels. Have you watch some of these guys like Lonis come up and say, "Wow, what's going on here?" He's
I
back in
do. I mean, I don't know enough about him specific. I mean, I've watched him play on
yeah, yeah,
TV, but
yeah,
I don't have an opinion about how good he is or not. I have no idea. But obviously, his results have been great. I do think that it feels it feels to me like at some level you need to at some level of competition you need to do some studying in solvers or at least be coached by somebody who's well versed in optimal play.
right,
I'm willing to be wrong about that, but it feels like, I mean, some of the best players, even in the high stakes online games, I would call exploitative players, but they understand theory very, very well.
for sure.
Deviate from there. But I do think, I mean, I would consider myself very much an exploitative player, not a GTO player, but I understand theory and kind of understand the core concepts and take it from there. I do a lot of adjusting to individual opponents because
Of
that's
course.
part of the game I love.
Well, when did you hit? Was it from the very beginning? Were you business oriented as far as when did it hit you? Hey, I want to start my own company and the evolution of Run It Once.
I think I was always a dreamer. I would say I always had competing, these competing beliefs of, I think, like part of me thinks I'm capable of anything, and other part of me really needs to prove to that part of me, like needs to prove that I am. And so I've always wanted to try and well achieve great things, whatever that means. Um, but actually, Run It Once training came along. It was less that. It was more I loved teaching. Um, and I was making videos for Blue Fire Poker,
Oh yeah,
and I ended up not liking the business arrangement there, and we couldn't reach an agreement that made sense for us, and so I just was like, I want to keep teaching, and I think I have better ideas for how to teach than what's going on right now.
hmm
And so that led to me starting Run It Once. But it wasn't even so much I'm super excited to start a business. I was certainly excited about it, but it was more, I want to keep teaching. I think there's a better way to do this. I think that, with control over the company, I can be more successful in this. And so that wasn't pure, like it wasn't pure desire to be entrepreneurial that
Mhm.
started that. But then as we succeeded with Run It Once training, yeah, I got excited about other ideas and
Yeah.
let's try that and let's try that.
Well, you evolved into having your own online site, correct?
Yeah.
So, talk a bit about the evolution of that, and then you were acquired by Rush Street in 2022, and now it's evolved into your relationship with Bet Rivers Poker, right?
Yeah.
Am I following the right through line there of how it all came about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So we started working on Run It Once Poker. I mean, we started talking about it in 2015, and started work in 2016. And it wasn't until 2019 that we launched after a lot of technical delays. And yeah, we operated it from early 2019 to basically the beginning of 2022.
mhm.
We shut it down at the end of 2021 and were acquired by Rush Street then.
March
Um,
22, yeah, 2022.
yeah. The and yeah, so the idea for the impetus behind that, like, okay, so there was always this. I was excited to try to do big things, and I mean, building an online poker site's a big thing.
Big.
But there always was a kind of a reason behind the things that we started, and so the reason behind that was, I mean, the landscape has changed dramatically since then. But at that time, Amaya had purchased PokerStars, and were taking it in a direction that scared me as an online poker player.
Yeah, how so?
So they'd started by doing a couple things with rewards, so taking away rewards in some ways that people thought were unethical. But then what really scared me was, they introduced spin and goes. They introduced a format that was called Beat the Clock that they
Mm,
discontinued, and these were both low edge formats with, where it was conceivable that the rake would be unbeatable. And so I was worried that they were going to take online poker in the direction of casino, like turn it into a poker themed casino where you couldn't really make a living as a player. You could play the game, you could be better than an opponent, but you still couldn't beat the rake.
right.
So I was, and they were effectively a monopoly at that point.
Very much.
Um, and so I was really scared as a player of what the future of online poker looked like. At that time, when Amaya took over, there was, I think exodus is probably a little too strong, but a lot of staff left PokerStars because they didn't like the direction it was heading also.
Right.
And I was friendly with one of those guys who left, and we got to talking about the idea, um, and we did some research into, if we thought it could be viable and how we would do it.
Mhm.
But yeah, the impetus was, I think online poker needs this. I'm afraid as a player, we need something like this. I think we're, it's our first business went well, so surely we're good at business. um, and so let's do this. And yeah, lessons were learned.
So, what kind of did you have to bring on investors to build an online site? I would assume you'd have to at such a big undertaking.
Yeah, the intention was not to. The intention was, with my own money and with free cash flow from Run It Once training, would be enough to sustain us until we knew we were, like basically to get to break even.
Right.
But as it turns out, what we thought was going to take less than a year took over 3 years. And so we were not able to keep up. And so we did take on investors, kind of midway through the building of the
Mhm.
platform. Um, and I there's so many things that I learned along the way.
I bet.
And I think the biggest, I think, cautionary tale is that, we mapped this out. We had a plan where, like I said, I'd put in a little money, then it wouldn't require more money because our free cash flow would cover it.
Mhm.
And then we would see if it works. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And even then, once it was like, okay, we need some more money. I'm going to put some more in. But we need more than just what I have. So let's get some other investors. We did that. I still, I don't know, we kept thinking too short term, where it was, okay, surely we'll be launched in 4 months from now. So let's get like 6 months of runway so we can see where we're at. And then, with the delays, but not only the delays, but even once we launched, it wasn't so bad that it was clear we were going to fail, and it wasn't great. So
Mhm.
what happened was we were gaining, like, we had some decent traffic, we had good reception. The players who played on it loved it for the most part, other than some bugs in the beginning. And then it was like, well, we need more money to keep this going. And if I don't put more money in, then we've, you know, like there's a sunk cost fallacy that people talk about, but it's not really a fallacy in this situation, where if I want to let it die, then I do actually lose all,
Yeah.
basically, I have great pot odds. And then you continue to have great pot odds
Yeah.
as it goes on, because you've got all this other money invested and like all this other value, and you only have to put a little more in to keep going. And essentially, by the end of it, I had put in way more than I, responsibly should have into any venture. Just like way too large a percentage of my net worth was all tied up in this one thing. And yeah, it was just too risky, and I couldn't stop. Obviously I could have stopped, but it was challenging. And we did raise some money at certain points after launch, but at some points it wasn't looking great. So like I couldn't in good conscience ask anybody to raise money. So I was the only one at those points that could put money in.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it was like, basically, if I had to sum up the lesson into one thing, which was many things, it would be, you know, plan for several potential outcomes, not just like two.
Right.
Oh, it could go this way or it could go this way. No, they could go, you know, many dozen of ways. And you need to know what's going to happen in those situations. And so what we could have done is raise a lot more money, or aim to raise a lot more money before we even started. We could have, set a set a stop loss, so to speak, and stuck with it. There are a lot of things we could have done to prepare better.
Well, one thing I learned, I've done businesses since I was a teenager, and nutrition business, apparel business, is that you always need more money than you think you do.
Yeah.
You really got to have some miscellaneous over here. Like
Mm-hmm.
stuff is going to happen. Like, oh, I didn't expect I needed that kind of software. Back in the day, accounting software, I think we spent like $30,000. This is like 96, right? Back when we didn't have all this QuickBooks stuff. And it had to be custom for my business, for my nutrition company worldwide. So it's you always have to have that. You don't think you're going to need it. Like you said, you expected cash flow. It was going to cover it all, but it never will. You got to expect it's like the variance you talk about in poker. Things will happen worse than you can think. Just prepare for that. That's all you
Yeah.
can do.
We were fortunate and unfortunate that, when we launched Run It Once, I mean, we spent a decent amount. We spent six figures on the website, and we paid our coaches well. Because we went from the most sites were releasing like 2 to 3 videos a week. We released 2 a day, and every day. And so we paid a lot of money for our coaches, but it was successful immediately. And
Right.
so we're obviously fortunate in that respect, but also it didn't teach us the lesson we needed to learn.
Well, talk then some about how this evolved into your recent business deal with Bet Rivers that
Yeah.
came
So
about.
yeah. So at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, we sold the platform and our team to RSI. And RSI, our Rush Street Interactive, operates a couple of online brands. Bet Rivers is the most known one. They have a different one
Okay.
in South America called RushBet. There's Play Sugar House in Pennsylvania as well. But basically, Bet Rivers is the big one. And so, yeah, they bought us knowing that there was a lot of work to do to get the platform not only integrated with their existing online casino and sportsbook, but built to scale, which, apparently ours was not. Um, so, they we had been through negotiations with several companies, and had a better offer. It fell through. This was it was, we certainly lost money. I lost a lot of money on the venture, but we got something back. And most importantly, it lives on. And kind of the ideas that we built, the platform we built, the kind of features and policies we designed, and the team, at least, a large part of the team continued on. And it was actually, when we started Run Once Poker, it was a dream to launch it in the US. And while this isn't exactly how I wanted to achieve the dream, it's still really exciting to be impacting the US market as an American. And, hopefully over the following years, can have some impact on the expansion of online poker in the US, and certainly giving people another option in a lot of the states.
Right. I'm going to pause for a second. The sun's moved on me. I'm just going to fix this. Will fix this in the video. One
No
second.
problem.
So, so what your vision for the future is to obviously you see the online sites like PokerStars and GG investing more in the U.S. markets as you see it. Stars is back doing the tournaments. GG's bought WSOP. I don't know how that impacts your business, or you're excited about it all. I'm curious. And what's your vision? Obviously, we'd all like to see poker, licensed everywhere, every state. It's a game we all love and want to play. And we were hoping it would happen in one of these administrations the last, 8 years. It hasn't yet. Do you know more about inside information about that? Or are you just hoping that will evolve? Obviously, PokerStars and GT are big brands, and they are staking and that it will happen, the licensing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had inside information 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, basically, where
Right.
4 years ago, where, like, when we were shopping around Run Once Poker, there was a lot of interest from US gaming companies. Like, it seemed as though the US gaming companies were all planning to add poker, and they thought poker was coming to many more states.
Yep.
Um, that seems to have not come true in the way that I thought it would since then. And I'm not sure exactly why. But based on my understanding of, how things go, I think PokerStars, pouring more money into poker in the US, GG pouring more money into poker in the US, potentially DraftKings, who started like
Yep.
just to sit and go and game in their casino. I don't know if they have poker planned, but um, when you get a lot of, and RSI and all these companies, when you get more financial interest for these companies, if they have more financial interest in growing poker in the US, it tends to make things happen. Um, and so my hope is that, yeah, this leads to lobbying and policy change and expansion into more and more states, and that there is kind of a tipping point where, yeah, where it's great, like where we can play in most states and the liquidity is good. I would love for us to share liquidity with other regulated markets.
Yep.
I don't know how feasible that is, truthfully, but that's kind of my dream, both, as somebody working on a platform and a player.
Right. Well, talk a bit about your challenges. So you sort of, is it like you get the itch to play? I mean, I looked at, you had Bill
Mhm.
Perkins, who is just an amazing person overall. I
Mhm.
enjoy watching Bill play, and that was a funny match. Brandon Adams, Chance Corneth, as I said, someone I've worked with a lot. Same for Jungle Man. And then the big comeback when you were down 900,000 to Veni Vidi 1993 back then, and won the 100,000 side bet. So is this something that you just want to challenge yourself? And we all do. Uh,
Yeah, much like,
Curious.
I still have that itch, and right now I don't have poker to play. And I am looking forward to the day that I do, but that's a very broad statement. I technically have poker to play. I have nothing that
You
makes
could have
sense
been
right
in the
now.
$1 million game in Bermuda. I mean, Bahamas. What's going on?
Yeah.
We'll go, are you rooting for someone, or would you have wanted to play in something like that?
Um, the I'm trying to think. Was this the so there was the 500K invitational, right? And then
That's
the
the
million
one where
dollar is different.
that's the one going on right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get
Yeah,
the
I
itch?
mean,
What's with the itch to play? You do these challenges. A famous one with Chance too. I think Chance bought out, if I'm correct, right? Did Chance
yeah.
buy out of that challenge?
Well,
Or
it's just kind of just waving their white flag, and you pay
yeah,
the side bet. Yeah.
yeah. So what is your impetus to doing this? You like just excited to learn again and play, to evolve your game in PLO and things like that. Is that the impetus behind it? And also, obviously, you're just a really great coach, and you want to show, hey, I can teach PLO, or my team can teach you PLO, or no limit. I'm sure that's part of it too.
Yeah. So I had the realization about a year and a half before the challenge, when I was just like kind of banging my head against the wall with the business ventures, um, and trying to figure it out. I had the realization that I loved playing poker a lot more than I loved doing business. And yeah, I was at a bad time for business, so maybe that played a part.
Yeah,
Um, but I had the realization then that I want to be a poker player, not a business owner. Or I mean, I can be both, but I wanted to be a poker player. And it took a while because I still didn't see a great opportunity. And then I noticed that specifically in PLO, we'd been dropping members at Run It Once. And actually, no, I don't know if we were dropping members. My videos were getting fewer views.
okay,
And I was like, at first, I was like, well, it makes sense. I haven't played PLO in a few years. And then I guess it's not that I got frustrated by it, but I didn't like that I was not as sought after of a coach, because I thought I still had a lot to teach, and I knew that like I felt like I could play well, but the fact that I wasn't out there proving myself, like it made sense. And so then I thought, okay, well I want to prove myself again to me and to them. Um, and so the first idea for the Galfond challenge was just going to be, hey, anybody who coaches PLO or anybody who coaches on a different training site, I'll give you 4-1 to play me on a side bet over 50,000 hands, and let's see what happens. But then it became, okay, well, if we do this, and I kind of open up the challenge to others in case people don't take me up on that, it can also promote the poker platform, Run It Once
mhm,
poker ball. So then I went from there. That offer was out there, but also I opened it up and I said, anybody reach out if you want to play, and we'll
right.
see if we can work something out. So Chance was the only coach who took me up on it, um, which I wasn't expecting it to be him, because I mean, I know he plays PLO and he plays it well, but like he's a no limit hold'em tournament player. I was expecting a PLO
Yeah.
specialist coach to play me. Um, but he went for it, and he played well. Um, but then yeah, it was other pros. I mean, Bill, who was a lot of, like you said, a lot of fun. We were on the phone like during most of our match, while we were live streaming. Um, but yeah, that was how it got started and where it got to. And as you mentioned, it started off pretty badly for me in the Venividi match, before I kind of put the pieces together between what I learned just recently with solvers and kind of my old way of thinking. Now there was also, I ran bad at first, then I ran good
Yeah.
after. That was absolutely part of it. But there was also a shift in kind of everything clicking.
Can you talk a bit about that shift and what kind of things you were thinking about? Because that's what players are probably going, well, what did he do to make that shift, to make the adjustment? You've always been good at that in your game. Like you said, you're a guy that likes to figure things out, like the puzzle of it. Can you give us maybe a couple of the keys to the shift? Obviously, you're picking up things and watching his tendencies and things like that, or maybe not give away too much. It's up to
No,
you
no, it's
what you want to share.
there were there were three main things. One was just time. So there's the four stages of competence, right? So I had learned solvers, but it took a lot of conscious effort for me to play the way that I had learned. And over time of practicing that, some of that became more automatic, where when a certain flop hit, I knew exactly what bet sizing I was making and I didn't have to think about it. and I knew roughly what kind of hands I was betting. I didn't have to think about it anymore. So like
Mhm.
felt strategy, I kind of got more of. And what that allowed me to do is it freed up mental bandwidth because you're playing, especially online, you only have so many seconds to make a decision. We're two tabling and
Right.
playing heads up. So the action's on me very often. And so when I had to think so hard about what I had learned and putting it into practice, I didn't have room to, well, I didn't have room for advanced thought really beyond that. So, I mean, a lot of people think of solver poker as advanced thought. I think of advanced thought as, you know what you want to do in theory, and then okay, how does this person play? How has this session gone? What are some ways that I could counter that? What could I do with this hand that is not theoretically sound but would work out better because of X, Y, and Z?
Mhm.
Um, I didn't have bandwidth for that at first because it just took up so much mental space. So that was one. The other on the break. So I took a break. Um, Benny V was going on vacation, and I actually paid a penalty to get out of a couple sessions,
Mhm.
so that I had like I forget, maybe 2 week break entirely. And during that time, one of my friends who I was studying with, I mean, he said, who knows if he was right or not, but he said, honestly, Phil, the pre-solver Phil would be a favorite in this match.
Hmm.
So, s- so why don't you, like, if you can't figure out what the solver would do, stop thinking about it and do what Phil would do.
Wow. Okay.
And that was impactful for me, just because, yeah, it was freeing to know that. And again, could pre-solver Phil beat Venividi? I don't know, but at least this good player believed that he could. Um, and it was freeing to, okay, if I know roughly what my strategy is, I'll implement that plus some changes.
Mhm.
If I don't know, stop like racking my brain about similar spots that I studied and what it might mean. Just say, okay, how does he play? What do I want to do with my hand? Um, and that, I think, had a big impact. And also then, like, of the friends that I studied with, I started studying more with one who is less theory, more exploit. And that kind of helped me get back into that frame of mind.
That's excellent. When I first started playing, coming to LA, there was very little, no limit at the time. It was, 7 card stud
Mhm.
and 5 card stud back in the early '90s, and then with the moneymaker thing and all the no limit hold'em, and I didn't hear much about PLO at that time. I didn't even see a game, here at the Commerce or somewhere in LA. So the game's evolved a lot. As far as even people going, oh, I need to check out the 4 card game. Now it's 5 card, 6 card PLO on some
Yeah.
sites. Can you talk a bit about someone new to PLO? It's been very popular for the last few years. Where should they start, especially at running once? Where should they start, and how should they start thinking about the game if they've played No Limit a long time?
It's a great question. At Run It Once, I would start with From the Ground Up PLO. It's by Thomas Emter. He's a very good coach, and it starts you from a place of, the basics. And even if you know the basics, it's still a good place to start because he goes from basics to implementation and some more advanced stuff before you get into other. And we have other courses that are more advanced than that. We of course have essential and elite memberships where they're kind of random videos. That's the reason I say random videos is because I strongly believe that if you're just starting out in something, you're going to benefit from something structured. So a course or a book, rather than, what we have at Run It Once, especially with elite, is many of the best players in the entire world just playing and telling you what they're thinking.
Mm.
But if you're not a strong player, there's not an A to Z framework there for you to learn. And so if you're not a strong player already, it's easier to do something wrong with that than to do something right. If you're a strong player, it's incredibly valuable.
Right.
Um, and so I would strongly advise, getting started with a structured course that is geared towards beginners. Even if you don't feel like you're a total beginner, some people shy away from that word. Like when you say beginner, they're like, "Oh, that's not me." But
Mm. Yeah,
if you're not an expert, if that sounds better for people, but
probably.
yeah, I think that is the way to start. Yeah, I mean, we also to throw at everything that we sell. But Vision PLO Trainer is awesome. I wouldn't say for total beginners it is,
Hmm.
because being able to, it's solver tool, where we've run all the solutions for you, and they're all in there and easier to understand than if you were to install Monk or Solver on a web server. Um, a server. Um, the the thing about it is, if you're playing live 1-2 PLO, 7 people are seeing the flop. It's like the solutions aren't going to help you.
Right.
Um, and so I think, plus you're just going to take the wrong things away if you don't know what you're doing. So I think that when you're starting out, structured content and, um, like I said earlier, friends and or coaches that you can, get back and forth with and see where the holes in your game are.
Right. Excellent. Excellent for people. I know I've been entertained, and Patrick has been a friend for a long time. I think I did his first cover story years and years ago. And Patrick, if I remember correctly, he started with PLO. He didn't start with No Limit with two card. If I remember correctly, he started playing in his. I think he grew up playing PLO, right? Am I right about that?
I actually don't know. So like when I became aware of Patrick, he was just playing the highest stakes both games, I think.
Okay, but he's a very talented person,
Yeah.
obviously, to play all the games. But have you been entertained, or have you had a chance? You're a busy person like myself to watch the Jared Blesnick and his match, and Patrick lost all three matches. So, and Jared to say, "I owned you, dude. I owned you." So,
I
Jared's
haven't
very entertaining.
He is entertaining. I mean, I haven't seen it. I don't think you can own somebody over a sit and go, a 2-hour sit and go. But, no, I haven't seen it. I've really enjoyed I just run out of time lately. I really enjoyed the early duel
Yeah, the heads up
matches
matches
on
like Helmuth
PokerGo.
and Negreanu, things like that. Those
Yeah.
early ones, yeah.
Helmuth and Negreanu, Helmuth and Antonio. Um, I think the re the reason I don't have time anymore is because my wife Farah liked watching those, and she stopped watching them, and so now, like, I'm either working or I'm with the family, so if they're not watching it, I'm not watching it. So I haven't watched those ones, but, I'm sure they'd be entertaining.
No, I get it. Well, that brings up something else. I'm glad you brought up Farah. I've never met Farah. She has a great online presence, and
Mm,
obviously you're married to a woman that loves poker. And I loved a quote. I think you just celebrated your anniversary, and you said, "Hey, I jumped into something that didn't have complete information for. I asked you to marry me. Was
mm,
it like 10 years ago or so? And
yeah,
you were very just congratulating her and happy to have her in your life.
yeah,
Can you talk a bit about how a lot of the players interviewed in the early days, whether it be Chance or Sean, Shannon Shore, all you guys have kids now.
yeah.
So how has that impacted your game, your life? You have I think 6 year old. Am I correct? Something
He'll be 6, very soon.
very
Yeah.
soon. So talk a bit about how having that kind of relationship in your life has supported you and been some grounding for you in your game and in your life, and then having a child.
Yeah. It's funny because I when I'm getting stressed out, because I take on a lot,
Mm,
and at times when I'm stressed, I sometimes I think back to my single days. I'm like, "Oh, I could work for 16 hours a
right.
day, every day, 7 days a week, and I could get all this done." Um, but the truth is, and I actually experienced this recently when I went to, Philadelphia to promote, the Bet Rivers launch in Pennsylvania. I went alone, and so I had some streaming obligations, which I mean, I wanted to do and also had planned to and said I would. And I had other work to do too, but I was like, I'm alone, so I'm gonna have, all day, every day, I'm gonna get so much done. And what ended up happening is I was kind of lazy, which I used to consider myself lazy. I don't anymore. But there I was kind of like, I don't know, I found myself wasting more time. And what it made me realize was the constraints of, I've got an understanding with my wife, and I mean my son understands it, I guess, but he wasn't part of the agreement. But I work from this hour to this hour on these days, and the it's actually it really was like, I know it's been beneficial, but it wasn't until very recently when I went on this trip that I realized how beneficial it was for me,
Mm,
because just the level of motivation I have during the time that I have, which is less than it used to be. um, I'm just so much more productive. I had to learn to be more productive, but part of that is motivation and kind of knowing there's an end point. It's hard to sprint if you don't know when you're going to stop sprinting. And knowing what I have to get done and where I have to fit it in has been really great for me. And also, by the same token, it regulates my daily schedule, my sleep schedule, which is hugely beneficial for performance in whatever you do. And so it's actually not like, maybe I'll have another realization in the next year or two about the level of emotional support and how that helps me. But I always felt pretty fine emotionally
Mhm.
in poker. And so it's less about that for me as it is just, some like the normalcy and structure. And of course, I guess this is not emotional control, but motivation. You know, I'm much more motivated to succeed and share it with my family
Yeah,
than when it's just me.
that's a huge motivation.
Mhm.
And it was, if I remember correctly, Farrah wasn't, or I don't know, she may still do some work. She's for acting background, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same thing in New York, and I did some soap operas myself back in the day,
Oh yeah.
trying to make some money. But and then did she start poker because when she met you, or was she already aware of the game?
She already started. So she was on Days of Our Lives, and then she left and joined One Life to Live, and that was going from LA to New York. And when she got there, she didn't have any friends, and a lot of the like cast and crew played poker.
Okay,
Um, and she had never tried it before. I mean, she had learned when she was a kid, you know, 5 card draw, but she went and played it to network basically with her, like meet her people around her,
right.
and just immediately loved it. And so she started going to Atlantic City a bunch. And I mean, she was a recreational player before she met me. I mean, I straightened her out, but yeah, she
Where
was
did you
very into
guys? Where'd you guys meet?
We met on Twitter.
Oh no!
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah. So it was um, like mid 2012,
Yeah.
and she followed like a handful of poker players, and I was one of them. And she tells the story much better than I do. But essentially, there was one tweet that I sent out after the main event that year where I just talked about how great an experience it was. I busted out on day 3 and I had a really good time. And I guess she had read that after seeing 8 bad beat stories and people complaining about their main event, and she said she felt inspired. She said she never responded before to somebody she didn't know on Twitter, but just said something nice about the positivity essentially. And um, I said something back, and then slowly over many months, there was a just like little back and forth banter.
Mhm.
And in one particular time, we were going back and forth, and I was getting on a flight. This is before you could just use Wi-Fi the whole time,
Right.
and we took off. And so I stopped responding, and she thought, I don't know, she thought maybe she said something wrong, or I don't know what.
Right.
So she DM'd me. That was first DM, and was like, "Oh, hey, I meant this." And I said, "Oh, I was just in the air. I didn't see it." Um, but then, yeah, DM to text to eventually meeting, and that was that.
You were, that's more than that was that. Come on.
Sure.
No, but you were
Oh,
in, you both were in New York City?
no. So at this time, we both lived in New York City at the same time, but we didn't know each other. At the
Okay.
time we met, she was in LA and I was in Vancouver.
Wow. Okay.
It was just after Black Friday. I mean, it was 22. It was a year after Black Friday, um, and it was actually so. Um, like any good introvert nerd, I like I I I couldn't really tell if we were flirting. I really thought we were, but like I didn't know, right? And it's funny now because like I can look back at early years of my life and I just believe that nobody liked me. No girls liked me. But I can look back at like, oh yeah, that should have been obvious to you,
Yeah.
Phil. But I wasn't really sure. But we've been talking for a long time, and we talked a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just like, this seems like something. So I, but I was like, I don't know, how are we gonna meet? So I planned a trip to LA, where I have some friends in LA, and I
Mhm.
just told her, hey, I'm gonna go hang out with my best friend in LA for a little while, and if you want to meet up, that'd be great. And so she said, yeah, and we
Yeah.
went out to dinner. But I mean, the trip was really just to meet her.
Yeah, of course.
Mm.
That's how you do it.
Yeah,
So can't take credit for this question. I have some more things to catch up with you on, but my editor said ask him what happens when his 6-year-old son gets a little older and reads about some of his dad's exploits and is requesting a slide from his bedroom to the breakfast table.
yeah, that'll
You
be a
had a,
fun.
you had a slide in New York City, is that right? From your apartment?
Yes, yeah, yeah. The condo I bought there was actually two condos that I bought above each other because the building, they didn't have one as big as I wanted, and
Yeah.
so but they had these two next to each other available, and so I bought them. And like the realtor was like, you could buy them and then just put a staircase here, and then basically that's all you have to do. Um, and immediately during the like when we were there, I just blurted out, "Oh, I should put a slide between them," half jokingly. And then I started, or mostly jokingly, and then I started really liking the idea, and I kind of thought, why not? Um, the slide was no more expensive than a staircase. There was a staircase too, but
Yeah.
um, but yeah, why not? And the architect told me it was the first residential slide in Manhattan, so
That's
I've
pretty
got that.
cool. So, I'm
Yeah,
sure there's some fire poles in Manhattan. I've been,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, so that's a little more dangerous than a slide. So people could choose to take a slide downstairs or take the stairs. Is that it?
yeah, yeah. And actually, it was kind of a dangerous slide. It was too fast.
The
So
angle was too strong.
yeah, like it was basically just you had to be ready to make an athletic landing. You couldn't just wake up in the morning and slide down. I remember, I don't know if he'll care that I say this so long ago, but the first time Tom Dwan went down, he completely wiped out. It was very funny.
Crash. No drunken slides can really be accomplished, I would assume, coming down
They sometimes were accomplished, but
that slide. So one thing that occurred, and I was involved in a little bit writing about the story, was, and it's a credit to you. You've been probably since the beginning of your career, and how you've articulated yourself in your writing and your playing and your coaching, is that you've been a person that an ambassador for the game, and people love you. And that's a credit to you and your heart and your love for coaching. It wasn't like there's great players like Phil and Daniel both have, lovers and haters. They both, and they have that dynamic. But for some reason, our editor was talking about, and I agree with them. Everybody loves you in the game, and which is a really credit to the way you've approached your life and the game. And I hope you take that in and realize that, and people watch you, your writing and the way you play, and because of that, you were invited to be the go-between between Nick Airball and Matt Berkey, which had to be as soon as you got involved, going, "Why did I do this shit? Why did I do this?" Because I was writing about it and knew about the whole match going on. And can you talk a bit about the craziness that went on, the negotiations back and forth that you can share?
yeah,
Obviously Matt won that $1 million match, but there was some negotiations back and forth, and you were like back and forth on Twitter and going, "Oh my God, what's going on here?"
yeah. No, it was. I mean, it was annoying and entertaining. And I mean, I posted some of the stuff on Twitter with, we were all posting some stuff, so it wasn't like behind their backs. But the so one thing I learned that I realized after doing a bit of arbitration, and I had been through like I had once get an arbitrator, I realized that people want a a thoughtful arbitrator that they think is going to be reasonable and like really think something through, because when people request arbitration, they always think they're right. So
Exactly.
so they're like, okay, I just want somebody who I know is going to be reasonable and really think this through. And unfortunately, you're not going to agree with both of them. So somebody's always going to be shocked that you didn't agree with them.
Exactly.
Feels so reasonable. And I'm right. So how does he not see it? Um, but yeah, this one came about, and I don't know why I said yes. I just did. And I mean, it was just, I guess every other arbitration I've been a part of, only a handful, well, less than a handful,
Yeah.
um, had been pretty easy. Like like Doug and Daniel played, and I was arbitrator, and we had one call at the beginning
Okay.
to kind of set up some ground rules, and then there was one dispute about tanking. And then they were playing one day, and Doug was limping and Daniel was tanking, and they got me on a call to talk about it. But like that, the whole match, that was it. It was two times. And
Yeah.
that's usually what it was, one time or two times or zero times. They would just be like, hey, we're gonna play this match. Can you be there in case there's a dispute? And then there's never a dispute. But with this one, it was, every session. Um, it was just like, you know, uh
I mean, the airball's going to the bathroom. He's
well,
talking to Sean. He was waiting in the bathroom to get advice, and it was kind of hilarious.
yeah,
I would assume Airball thought you were going to side with him every time, and Nick is quite the character. But
he's quite the character.
and Berkey's also a character in his own right, and a very forthright person in our industry. So, what was the biggest conflict they had? Was it going to the bathroom breaks every 10 minutes, or what was going on?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember I mean, I would say the biggest conflict in terms of where they just potentially the match, it seemed like for a while the match wasn't going to happen
Okay,
because uh Airball wanted his friends to be able to hang out and watch,
right.
and Berkey said, "No way, you can't
No
have."
freaking way.
Yeah. And that was one where they just like both were adamant. They're like, Airball's saying, "No, it's not fun. Sit in a room with you all day, every day. Like I want to hang out with somebody, with a friend." Um, and Berkey thought it was going to be tactical, and Airball's like, "Well, you can have somebody too. I don't care. It's just." And I don't know. It was tough, and that went back and forth for a while where nobody was going to budge. And I kind of oftentimes what happens in arbitration is, the way I like to do it is kind of try to let them sort it out. So I'll
Mhm.
say, basically, why don't you two discuss this for a while and see if you can reach a conclusion? And if you can't, then what I need you to say to me is, like, I need you to give me the power to make a ruling. And so I've been a part of arbitrations where I've asked this question and then somebody says, "Oh no." Like I've said, "Okay, so you guys agree that whatever I say is going to go." And one
Exactly.
person will say, no. And so I'm like, well, I can't do my job then, because there's no point in me telling you what I think. If
Right.
one of you is not going to abide by it, it's really unfair to the other person. And so that was one where I was just like, and I kind of said, I actually forget who, I think it was Berkey. So I said, okay, well, will you two agree that you're going to play and whatever I decide here is the thing? And Berkey said no, because he didn't want to play if there was going to be a scout in the room. And so then I was like, okay, well, I guess you two have to solve this, because I don't have the power to rule. If I'm misremembering that, Berkey, I apologize, but I think that's what it was, the way it went down.
Was Ishan allowed to be in the room, or no? I thought he wasn't.
No, ended up agreeing that he wouldn't be.
Okay. And obviously, Matt wouldn't think he needs a coach, and Nick needs
Mhm.
more of a coach for heads up play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. A couple more things. So, are you talk a bit about this? I've seen this. You've talked a bit about it on your X platform where people can follow Phil. Your new coaching program, sort of a career coaching. I mean, you now it's been over 20 years you've been playing poker and you've seen it all and been there and highest stakes, run a poker business, you know the industry very well. You help people with variance and you've been there, done that. Can you talk a bit about that career coaching that you're doing right now?
Yeah. So Beyond the Game, I launched it first as an experiment, and it was a 13-week program with 12 people, um, and I I put out a it was crazy. I put out a single tweet, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to do this just with a group of 12 people. Fill out an application here." It was kind of an extensive
Yeah.
application because I wanted to get to know the people. And 36 hours later, it was 210 people filled out an application. I was like, oh, okay, well, I was going to take 12 people. So, okay, maybe this is a real opportunity. And so I took two groups of 12, and it was my first time doing it. I discounted the price, which I mean, I announced, which was part of but from what it was going to be. But yeah, I thought that I had a lot of lessons to impart that I had learned not only as a poker player, but actually mostly after, like mostly as a business owner,
Right.
and just on my own, um, getting coaching, doing personal development work, kind of figuring out career direction and learning from my mistakes. Um, so I did that. I did two groups of 12 for a while, and it went really well. I did it again with two groups of 10 for a 10-week program. Um, and then I realized that I mean this is not the story that people who might sign up should care about, but it's what happened.
Okay.
Um, I I realized it was interesting because when I did the two groups of 10, I reached back out to everybody who applied the first time and said, "Hey, it's this program. The price has gone up now because it's not in beta anymore, and this is what it is." And I was shocked by how few people of that initial group responded. And so, one of the like I said, I do a lot of coaching. I'm in a lot of groups, and so a business group that I'm in,
Right.
I brought this up, and I was like, I mean, I people have really liked this. I know there's a lot of interest, but my process, I think, my sales process kind of sucks because I got all this interest. I said no to most of them. And then by the time like 4 months later, or 5 months later, when I said, "Hey, you want to do it?" most of them were not interested anymore. So I was saying, like, I guess maybe I should have an application deposit system and tell them within a certain time, because when you're doing when you're doing cohorts, you need them all to start at the same time.
Mhm.
So I gauged like how many applications I had, and I said, okay, I'm going to start two groups of 10 this date. But then I had some that I thought were going to be in, not be in. And so I ended up that was a group of 9 and a group of 7. Um, which was fine, but it was just, I don't know. I realized it was just logistically really challenging. And so I was saying, I guess I need some kind of deposit system. And one of the people in the group said, "Yeah, that seems like a good idea." Another person threw out some other ideas, and then the third person said, "No, your model's all wrong." And I
Okay.
said, "Oh, okay.
Tell me
What
about
should
it.
I? Yeah, what should I do?" And he's like, "Well, you need people to be able to join when they're ready to join. And so if you create a program that's evergreen that people can join at any point, you create a year-long program, people can join at any point for a year
Mhm.
and go through an onboarding and then become a part of the group. Um, and then you'll coach to however many people that is." And he was giving an example of a mentor of his who runs a business coaching program like this, um, and has like 600 people. And I just said, I can't. I've done these calls with 12 people. I've done them with 10 people. I've done them with
Wow.
6 people. I just can't picture what's going to happen with even 50 people. Like we're not going to get even 40 people. We're not going to get to talk. And I was asking him so many questions. He says, like, just sign up for this program because it's good anyway, and you'll learn. And so I did. And I actually like signed up for a couple programs and was researching how it would work. And I actually realized that the way that he was doing it, I didn't like for me.
Mhm.
Um, I don't mean as a customer, I mean as the coach. Um, and so I took some time, and for a while I was like, yeah, this makes sense business wise, but I don't see how I can do it in the
Mhm.
way that I'm teaching because I need more interaction than that would allow me. And anyway, long story, not so short. Um, this is like the most research for a business I've ever done. I usually just like, let's try it. But I mapped out a system that I thought could work really well and launched it. And um, we launched in well in I had the idea. I had this call. He gave me this idea at the end of May. At the beginning of July, we launched a 1 month pre-sale. And August 1st, we launched. So
Okay.
I tend to sprint to things, and it's been awesome. And we actually had 88 people join during the month of July. And I got a little bit overwhelmed with, I don't know. I was just like, we do a 90-minute call every week. It often ends up being 2 hours, but okay, it'll be a 90-minute call every week. This is not like a big commitment. I mean, I have to plan the call and so on and so forth, but it's ended up being a large part of my week every week, for so many different reasons. And so for the first 3 months, I actually didn't let anybody else in. I was just like, let's just
Okay.
focus on this. But now we're letting people in again. And yeah, it's funny. So at first, when I first introduced it, or maybe the second time I introduced it, whatever, I said it's like business and life coaching for poker players. And there was less interest when I said it that way. I think people they hear the words life coaching, and they're just like,
There's no.
yeah, that's a scam. I don't want to, yeah. And so then the next time I was like, okay, well, I don't want to use those words. So I'll explain the things that we cover. And like, I've got all these great testimonials from people who've been through it. So let's just let them speak for it. And the interesting thing is, I think I'm kind of like leaning back towards describing it that way just because the people that it attracts are the ones I want to work with most. So the people who want to work on themselves, not just Phil, help me make more money at 510 PLO. It's like, help me live a better life, help me improve my game, but not just my game, the whole approach I have, like what poker is to me. And it's, in some ways it's so stressful. It's a drain on my life. In these ways, I get out of my routines and my habits because when I'm on a downswing and this happens and I don't really like, I feel uncertain. I'm scared because, I play in this private club online and can make ends meet. But like, if this goes away, I don't know what I'm going to play. And so people who recognize it as kind of an opportunity to whatever they're working on, get help with. Those are the ones I really like to work with. And I said it was for high stakes, mid and high stakes and nosebleed poker players. We actually got and pros, but we actually about 20% of the people are recreational players who have been successful outside of poker. It's actually a really great mix because it's very community based, and those people who have run businesses and or are traders or what have you, they have a lot to offer the pros, and the pros have a lot to offer them. And so it's been great. It's been overwhelming, and I definitely have felt like every 90-minute call when I did it in the groups of 10 and 12, I'd prepare for like 3 hours each week to give the lecture. And then when I did it for 88 people, I prepared like 12 hours each week because it was the same content, but I was just like, it's too much pressure. I don't want to disappoint anybody. And so it's been a little overwhelming in terms of workload, but I think finally well, it's not even that I've gotten the workload less. It's that I've gotten a little more help with the like logistical stuff with my team. And then I've just decided this is the main thing I'm working on right now. And I've come to terms with it being a big time investment because there are enough people in it that, it almost makes it makes enough business sense for me to focus on this. And yeah, it's interesting because I spent my whole career, as we talked about, coaching strategy, and I love coaching strategy, and I always did. But I enjoy this more. I enjoy kind of tackling things outside of poker strategy. I think probably just because I've done strategy for so long.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fulfilling for you now to see how it impacts other people's life. It's interesting when I listen to you, and you give me the feeling of your energy very much like Tommy Angelo, and what I imagine Tommy would be like, and having watched some of his stuff. But you've evolved into kind of taking on some of that work and impressions you got from Tommy to what you're teaching now to people, which is fascinating and wonderful that you've come full circle with your journey to say you're impacting people's life that goes beyond poker, And I think being a positive force in poker is always been one of my missions. But there's some amazing players, some amazing people out there, and poker is a business. But you
Mhm.
also have to run your life. You've got, all you guys have kids now, and I mean, doesn't Tommy talk about it just about the breath? Am I right about Tommy? Which is a
Yeah.
very simple thing. And being a yoga teacher at one time myself, breath is powerful, and to use it within poker, you think a lot of people who aren't, what's the right word? Woke is not the right word, but just like, what does that matter? They don't take into consideration. Then I say, no, just sit down and breathe before you make a decision and see if that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Or before you make a decision whether you're going to break up with a girlfriend or buy a new car, take a breath. Even
Mhm.
before you're going to eat that chocolate cake when you're really on a diet, right? So, breath is a powerful thing of grounding you within yourself, and then you can make a more informed, more energetic, what's the right word? Just grounded decision. It's not coming from emotion or like, I've got to have that cake. I got to have that, something, right? So,
Yeah.
how's that feel for you to take that in? And these people you're impacting their life, which I think you're doing beyond poker, their relationships, their finances, things like that.
Yeah. It's been really rewarding. And I think to your point, one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years is especially I mean, a lot of poker players are very cerebral and
Yeah.
logic driven and just like the thoughts keep coming. And the natural tendency is to try to think yourself out of every problem, but it can be really helpful to just like connect to your body, like to
100.
get out of your head for a minute. Things can become a lot more clear to what you're saying. So I absolutely agree with that. Um, to your question, yeah, it's been rewarding and exciting. It's funny. I realized recently that one of the reasons I'm so nervous every week with the larger group
Yeah.
compared to the smaller group is in the smaller group I can do a lot of talking to every single person in the program, and I can see when it's helping them and like when it makes a big impact for somebody, or when they have a big aha moment. And with the larger group, I can't see that as easily. I do hop around into we split into like teams, and I hop
Mhm.
around into them, but I still don't get that like same one-on-one connection. And I realize that like I can't always tell how it's landing, which
Mm.
is part of what makes it scarier for me. Where I'm like, okay, I just got to make sure it's perfect. But as I get more experience and like as I get around to hopping into each team's
Mhm.
uh, groups and talking with them, yeah, I'm connecting to that more, and it is really rewarding.
Well, how has this affected your life? I'm just curious. I got a couple more questions. I'll let you go back to your busy life, and Farah and your son wanting to have a slide in his room.
Yeah,
But how has this affected your life? How are you feeling day to day? Like, what's your takeaways a bit from this kind? It's a huge undertaking what you're doing, and
yeah,
at the end of this, tell me how people can find that course on right.
sure, yeah. Um, the easiest way is just philgalfond.com and then click work with me.
Okay.
It's also philgalfond.com/beyond dash the dash game, I think, but just go to philgalfond.com and you'll
Okay.
find.
Okay.
But it's it's making me well, I'm learning more because I'm learning to teach, and then it's funny because like I'll set out, okay, next week I want to cover this thought, this idea,
Hmm.
something that I've learned over the last couple of years. And then as I dig into it to prepare for the lecture, I look back over notes that I've taken from things I've read or people I've talked to, and like I actually realize how much I missed like the first time around, and so I'm learning well through it. There's also, I think I mean, I mean, I work with a team, and I always have worked with a small team on my businesses, and small like poker teams, but this is much more social
Hmm.
than what my life usually is. And I'm enjoying connecting with more people, and connecting in, I don't know, a meaningful way. I'm somebody, and I think this is true of a lot of introverts, not all, but who, you go to an event or a party or a dinner, and like with people you don't know that well or some you do, and there's a lot of small talk, and it's uncomfortable and it's draining. And as soon as, even with a total stranger, we talk about something real, It's
Mhm.
actually energizing for me,
Sure.
and I love it. And so, just because of the way Beyond the Game is set up, we're not having small talk. We're talking about real issues that people are dealing with, and philosophies and thoughts that people are having, and ways to really improve what we're talking about challenges they're facing, and how to conquer them. And so I there's so much around it, like the preparing lectures, not a big fan of. There's legit like running the business. There's a lot of like noise around it, but when I just get on the calls and connect with people,
Mhm.
it's so energizing.
That's great. So
Mm.
I have to ask you one last thing. Are we going to see Phil playing in the WSOP or a tournament? Are you going to play at WPT at the Win this year, or are we going to see you in the main event next year? Did you play this year, the main event? Or I don't think you
I
did.
got talked into playing the main event
Oh,
this
you
last
did.
year.
Okay.
So yeah, I hadn't played a main event. I don't know how many years, maybe 7. Um, I would love to be playing online poker in legal regulated market in the US at high stakes. But
Yeah.
it's just not really a thing right now. Tournaments, I don't particularly enjoy them. And so I don't want to play tournaments. But if
Yeah.
I do, it's because I've reasoned that, it makes sense as an ambassador of Bet Rivers, as an ambassador of Run It Once and a coach, and maybe, for Beyond the Game as well, getting my face out there and the word out there. But it's not something I want to do. And one of the things that I don't know, come into awareness on is that I'm very, I've lived a fortunate life, and I'm very lucky that, like, I have the luxury now of, largely working on things that I want to do with people who I want to work with,
Yeah.
and things that give me energy and joy. And so I am trying to be more conscious about, looking at my weekly schedule of, like, how many of these things, feel like have tos and need tos versus
Mhm.
get tos and choose tos and want tos. And so I think, like, I see myself over the coming years when I look at my long-term goals. In years past, in many years past, I wouldn't set long-term goals. And this is something we talk about in the program. We start with goals, really. But in like a couple of years ago, a lot of my long-term goals were financial and some like achievement based.
Mhm.
And now a lot more of it looks like the way I spend my time. A lot more of it is, this is what I want to be doing things I love on a day-to-day basis. And I'm always going to keep working because there are a lot of things I love to create and do.
Right.
But how can I either delegate away or, pass up on a financial opportunity because it's not something that I love to do, and I have the luxury of being able to do that. Um, and so tournaments are a weird one for me because I don't love to play tournaments. It does make some sense to get myself out there and promote my businesses, but I have this third element that is weird, which is, when I connect with people on social media, or I go play a tournament in person, this is the question I always get asked, like, Phil, why don't we see you out there? Like, they want to see me. And
Yeah,
so,
I understand.
yeah. So like, there's also a desire to give the people what they want in a way.
Well, why not just challenge Jared? Now is that he beat Patrick 3 times in a row. Let's get you on Poker Go.
Yeah.
What better advertisement can that be? It's a great studio. They're great guys. I'd like to see you beat Jared, open up some playing cards or whatever he does, and have
Yeah.
some fun. Maybe
Yeah.
that's in the cards. Who knows? Just putting it out there. I'm sure people have said, "Hey, you should challenge Jared now." I think it's up to
Yeah.
250,000. I don't know how. I think you have to take over that. I'm not sure how it works, or you have
Yeah.
to.
I think they're changing the way it works. I've just started talking with, like, in past duels, it was kind of just, you know, you would get the call. Um,
Yeah.
but I think now they're changing the structure a little, and they're opening up a little bit. And I have talked to PokerGo a little bit about getting on there. And that's, so like playing cash. I mean, that's not really a cash game, but it's like
Yeah. I understand.
going to play in a studio where it's like, first of all, it's more fun to play heads up, or it's more fun to play a six-handed cash game for high stakes for me than it is to go play a tournament. And it makes more sense where if I go play whatever the 10K win event, right? There's X% chance that anybody even notices. I mean, realistically notices I'm playing because I bust out
Mm.
on day one, or
Right.
Um, so it does make sense, and I think that's probably whether it's at the Poker Go studio, or if I can push myself enough to get over to play like on some streams
Right.
in other states, then like I think that's the most likely place for you to see me playing poker, unless we get some more players in Nevada online poker and get a challenge going.
I hope so. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Phil, and catching up. It's been a while, and
You too, Craig.
I've been trying to see. You've been on my bucket list for a long time, and we're both busy people. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for the great talk, Craig.